Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Srikanth Mopidevi, Executive Director and Head Consumer Banking, Big Data Analytics Technology, DBS Bank. Could you please give him the caller mic? Thank you. Welcome, sir. So I'll just give a brief about you, please. He has over 20 years of experience in IT industry and entrepreneur who co-founded technology startups. In his recent role, of course, is heading big data and data analytics in banking industry, leading the Asia Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. First of all, I'd like to sincerely extend my thanks for inviting me here. I've been listening to the talks all day morning, and what hit home for me really is the transformation and the kind of discussions that were going on around how to bring in transformation and how to sustain transformation for an extremely longer duration, and then keep the pace running and so on. So the story that I would like to share with you is the transformation that we have actually gone through. A 50-year-old bank, which is, if you want to do a comparison, think of that as SBI in India, an equivalent of that for Singapore, and who's been a part of the journey in building the nation called Singapore. We actually all look up to Singapore as the most modern organization in the world right now, and so on and so forth. So what I would like to share with you is a journey that we have gone through in terms of transforming a bank called DBS, and the kind of, the thought process that went in behind that. I'll rush through the slides in the interest of trying to be a little bit more on the Q&A front, because there's going to be a lot of detail around that as well. If I can get the slides to work. All right, so 10 years back, DBS, Development Bank of Singapore, if you look back at it, we were nothing more than we were compared to a taxi. Whether you get into a taxi, which is an yellow cab versus a black cab and so on and so forth, essentially it gets your job done from going from point A to point B. DBS, although it was part of nation building for Singapore, we were looked at as one of those taxi companies, which is essentially getting us to save money for a bunch of people in the organization, in the country, and so on and so forth. That's where DBS was. Although it was called the banker of the nation, banker of choice, and so on and so forth, if you ask a common person on the street, the sentiment happens to be apologies. Can we get a clicker fixed, please? Or help me move to the next slide. Yeah, so that's essentially where we are. When we are talking to the common person on the street, where we were is we were at the rank bottom compared to, let's say, an HSBC or a Citibank and all these global organizations out there. We were hovering somewhere around the bottom 60s in terms of the satisfaction of the customers we have. So that was back in 2009. Okay, this one only wants to go back. Yeah, it's not going.
The green, is it?
Yeah.
You want to move forward?
Yeah, I'll. All right, there you go. Thank you. So that was a journey that we were in 2009. A bunch of us got together and said, okay, that is really not where we want to be, and how do we take this forward? So one of the things that we had is by year 2020, we would like to be the invisible bank, so to speak. And the idea being, banking is not looked at as something as an activity that will excite you to get doing, right? So you're not exactly waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to go bank today. We are waking up and saying, I'm going to live my life, and then banking happens to be a part of it. It could be a payments, it could be a saving, it could be a loan, it could be credit that you're getting from it, and so on and so forth. So what is the industry going to look like 10 years from today is a journey that we looked at and said banking is going to be literally invisible, and we want to be right there in the customer journey when they are living their lives and how we are embedding ourselves into the lives of the customer. So we said we're going to become digital to the core, and that's the journey that I was going to share. Now, I'll fast forward a little bit. Where we stand right now is a customer satisfaction about 71 in a span of 6 to 7 years, right? So that is beating all the other global banks out there. Even better, we are right now the only bank in the entire world which is holding 3 distinct awards called the best bank in the world, the most innovative bank ever, and the most digital bank. This is the only bank in the world right now holding all 3 awards simultaneously at the same time. The journey behind this, I mean, Piyush Gupta is the head of the bank. And when we started off, we went off into an offsite like any other organization and said, okay, there's going to be a big strategy meeting as to where we're going to go in and so on and so forth. The agenda that was presented to us, and anecdotally, is we're going to become the best bank in the world. Okay, so a bunch of us were looking at it and saying, so are we going to become global now? Are we going to start opening up our branches in North America, Europe, and everywhere around the world? So how do you become the best bank in the world? We are not talking about best bank in a particular region and so on and so forth. So we were making all these presentations back to the board and to the CEO, saying we're going to make so much of an investment and become very vibrant in the community. And the way Piyush sort of countered back to us is, think of Changi Airport, which has been receiving best airport in the world successfully in the past 8 years. And Changi Airport is only located in Singapore and not around the world. So what exactly are they doing that they are getting the best bank or the best airport in the world that you can't learn from? And that for us was an eye-opening moment in the sense. It was not about driving in so much of investment and trying to become available everywhere in Africa, in Europe, and so on and so forth. It's about understanding what the customer really wants and serving them at the moment that they want it, right? So that's been the journey that we've been in. So the 3 pivots that we then came up with after that discussion was, we need to become digital to the core. Anecdotally, I'll share some information. Like any other bank in the world, we never owned our technology. Our technology was entirely outsourced to our vendor partners, right? I mean, there are a number of partners that were actually building the technology, and we never owned it. So first and foremost, if you don't own your technology, how are you going to become digital, right? So we said, first, we're going to inner source all this. About 85% or more of our technology was owned by our vendor partners. We started bringing them in. And that's the journey that we started in. And I will actually give you some real-life examples of what does it mean when you start owning your own technology, right? And incidentally, it just happens that I have all the buzzwords in my title. You have big data, you have machine learning, you have consumer banking. It cannot get any better than that. And I will actually put that in context as to how we are driving that kind of a technology agenda forward. So phase 1, bring everything in-house, right? And we looked at it and say, if you start bringing everything in-house, and what does a company like a Facebook do? They have massive amount of data. And there is no other better organization in the world to learn from other than Facebook. So fine, we're going to go learn from Facebook as to how to start doing it. And the investments that a Facebook does is massive amount of infrastructure that they have, which is resilient, available 100% of the time, and does not go down. And even if it goes down, it has fail-safe mechanisms built in such that it is able to come back in again. So we started looking at building resiliency across all of the data we have. The data centers are revamped. We started inner sourcing all of our architectures as well. And then one thing that is very unique to banking industry is we are a heavily regulated and compliance-driven industry, right? So data security, making sure everything that we have ownership over is protected all the time is of paramount importance for us. So we started investing heavily into security and so on. And then the monitoring center. And that was not enough in terms of bringing back in. The lesson that we learned from Facebook is there is so much that you can actually learn, and you don't have to reinvent everything by yourself. So we devised this thing called Gandalf as a journey for ourselves. The Gandalf Journey is all the marquee organizations that you see out there. These are the tech big giants, right? So we coined this term called Gandalf, and the D in that Gandalf stands for DBS. What can we learn from Google? What can we learn from Amazon? What can we learn from Netflix? And so on and so forth. It's not about trying to emulate them, but rather looking at what is it that they are doing really, really well. Can we bring that in and make it our own and start driving the transformation for the bank? The person that you see in the picture is our global CTO. He was the one who started devising that up, and we started running around, learning from all these organizations as to how to bring those things in. That manifested in what we are referring to as the cheese wheel that you see out there, right? So this was about 5 years back. And I said, okay, here are the 5 pivots on which we're going to start making our investments in. Stop doing projects, but instead look at a life cycle of what a customer really wants. Instead of doing piecemealing of a project, which will never interact with each other, instead look at it from a portfolio standpoint. So own the portfolio end to end. Similarly, automate everything. And I'll give you some real life examples of how aggressive and how ambitious we started doing our automation. And some of those manifested in becoming cloud native. We not only brought 50 years worth of technology that the customers, our vendor partners had built, we started making everything cloud native. We are the only bank in the world who is currently operating on public cloud. And you also know that most of the banks have got such a resistance towards operating in cloud. We won't put everything in our data in the public cloud and so on and so forth. We are the only bank right now who is aggressively adopting cloud technologies to the core. along the similar lines, I'll put some things in context for you. When we started in 2009, the graph on this side is essentially where we were. We did not own a single piece of technology. All we were doing is we were managing a bunch of vendors, right? And then whatever the vendor provides to us as technology, we ended up running our bank on top of it. From there, by end of 2018, we had an extremely small exposure towards our vendor partners, and we started building this entire organization ground up. And then again came a moment of truth for us in terms of, okay, you've accomplished all this, but then where do you take from there? Because the world keeps moving. Customer journeys keep moving. No two customers interact the same way with the bank. That means we need to keep innovating on top of it. So again, the question of moment for us is, what does Jeff Bezos do if he was running the bank? Because the reality be told, the choice that Piyush presented is in two factors. One, you have the likes of Amazon, Alibaba, and all these companies, which can at any point in time decide to come into banking industry, and they'll disrupt the heck out of all of us. That's choice one for you. The second choice, like any other traditional bank, we keep measuring the same metrics of NIM and CIR and so on and so forth, which is your net interest margin, the cost-income ratio. These are your traditional banking metrics, right? Either you keep optimizing on that, or you pick up and completely transform yourself. That's the journey that we're in. All of us actually chose that we'll become a tech company, right? So from bottom up, the kind of metrics that we measure ourselves on, for example, cost-income ratio, which is the amount of investment you have to make before you earn a single dollar, for example, right? The best bank in the world anywhere is today operating at about 55 cents, meaning to make $1, they have to invest 55 cents. Where we stand as DBS today is our investment, our CIR, is 42 cents. For every single dollar that we are making an investment of 42 cents. All right, so that's lots of learning bit that we set in. The underlying, I think, that the thread or the fabric, and which is really unique to us, and probably a definition of what this Asian culture is all about, is a lot of empathy that is built into us. It was never about we have all the solutions or we know everything that we are doing. It's all about how do we learn from each other and bring that back into the system. I think that's a unique factor that stands out for us. And what we also learned is any transformation journey, it's easy for you to assume that you know everything and start investing in, and those are the transformations that tend to fail. Versus the reason why our transformation has been successful is because we've been very open-minded in terms of learning from everybody outside, trying to invest our time and energy in what we do best. I think those were the learnings that we had. And how we accomplished that is very simple. When we looked at it about 5 years back, and this was an offsite in Bali, all of us were scratching our heads saying, how do we break this up? What Piyush told us is really, really big mandate. You cannot take a 50-year-old bank and make it a technology company overnight. So that's a massive amount of undertaking that has to go in. In fact, I think the learning that we had is from the PMI Institute, honestly. Break it down into smaller things. Don't try to gobble up the entire thing at one shot. That's your core principles of software development, but how do I do that is really the essence of it. So cloud lipstick is what essentially goes through in the world today. Majority of them are cloud native, at least in claims, but what we're saying is we're going to be cloud to the core. Again, let me put that in context. You have this massive data center that I have in Singapore, which is 30% of the entire data center that a competitive bank that I have. So imagine a building of this size. Just give me 30% of it, and I'm running my entire bank on the 30% footprint. Okay, so that's the relativity of how big or small that we are. So that resulted in what? 75% reduction in net carbon footprint that we have. This came in as a deliberate plan, as opposed to us deciding, okay, we're going to do everything in small scale, right? So 75% reduction. Singapore government recognized the energy that was going in and said this is probably the only bank that is more innovative in terms of creating the carbon neutrality around that. Then came in. So what does that mean for us, right? So if you look back at this anecdotal quote that Jack Ma, Alibaba, head of Alibaba, Tencent, and all these organizations, he says, if you want 10,000 new customers, just build a warehouse and I'm done. I can acquire brand new 10,000 customers. By the way, acquiring 10,000 new customers in a banking industry is next to impossible. That's just hard work. The way we are acquiring customers, and Dave Gledhill again, he stood up to Jack Ma and said, just give me 2 servers, I'll do it. Okay, so that is not us speaking out of arrogance, but that is out of anecdotal data that we have and the kind of scale that we've been able to build. Let me put that again in context. That's my tech spend and so on and so forth. I won't belabor that. The second most important thing that we also realized is for us to be successful in doing this, we need to embrace agility to the core. The traditional way of building software and releasing it to customers is really not going to scale for us. The only way we can do this is to embrace agility and to the fact that we are able to go to the market every day. To put that again in context, all of 2019 or the year so far, I've done, I think, 2,300 releases. That means literally multiple releases every day to the customer. No other bank in the world can do that right now. So that's a 10x improvement of where I stand or where I was in the past to where we stand right now. Building APIs and performance, I'll also put that in context. Okay, let me bring all these examples together and give you real life scenarios of what this means for us. If you are a DBS customer, you've now seen this logo by now. If you're not, I'd ask you to go check it out. It's a DigiBank app. We built this about 18 months back. We started this journey about 18 months back. Okay, this is a mobile app. The unique thing about this mobile app, and this is the only app in the world today which will allow you to open an account and operate it in under 90 seconds. Meaning, you can actually go into Play Store or Apple Play Store right now, install this app called DigiBank app, start your customer journey, and within 90 seconds or right after 90 seconds, you have an operating bank account through which you can transact. Okay, so we started building this app, my team here, which is just a team of 75 members, okay, mobile developers, so on and so forth. We started building this app about 18 months back. We launched to the market in India, and right now I have a deposit book of 850 crores. No other startup is able to achieve that kind of a scale right now. Okay, so paperless account, completely digital to the core. Within 90 seconds, you're able to operate your account. Next, we started looking at modern systems and building connectors. And the other realization that we came to is you need to be an ecosystem player, meaning you as an entity, you as an organization is not going to survive for too long, and we all need to be playing with each other nicely, and that's ecosystem play. Again, we started building this thing called an API portal, and we are the only bank again in the world which has got 350 of our core APIs exposed to the outside world. That means any developer anywhere in the world can pick up and start interacting with our banking system. Imagine the significance of it for a second, right? Banking system traditionally is an extremely closed, regulated, and compliance-driven industry. And all of a sudden, here is a bank that is opening that up and saying any developer anywhere in the world is able to consume my APIs. And I have this portal up and running right now. The first person that sort of picked it up and started partnering with us is this company called Tally. Tally is very famous for accounting software and so on and so forth. So Tally saw the value behind this, and they started integrating with the DBS Bank account, and they built those APIs. And we have a connected ERP experience around India right now. 8 million SMEs, by the way, start using Tally, and by virtue of it, DBS Bank. So what does that mean for us in the future, right? So the big lesson that we learned out of it is we need to start layering this bank functionality away and start building a solar system around it. Instead of assuming that we know everything, we're going to hoard everything, we started operating in the data part of it. Data, to me, is the fuel. And that's where my concept of big data and machine learning comes into play. Let me again try to give you an example of it. All day long, we've been talking about gender diversity and how do we ensure there is workplace safety and so on and so forth. Yes, I mean, we also have a lot of policies around it and so on. But we are actually going, I would say, multiple steps ahead. The policy that we have is something called POSH, Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Work. But the problem with that policy is you cannot really prevent sexual harassment. What you're doing is you are reacting when a particular case is submitted to you. When something gets surfaced to you, then there is a council that gets formed. They'll analyze what happened. They look at who is at fault and so on and so forth. The reason why we are called POSH is we actually have machine learning algorithms running behind the scenes on every single employee and say who might be at risk. Even before an incident can happen, we're able to predict. It's borderline minority report, but then bear with me there. Even before something can happen. And that's how we are using machine learning. So that's your real-time use case. And what do we do as an action before that happens is very simple, right? Either you give an extra layer of security there. That's how you sort of prevent it. As opposed to a cash committee, which is very common in the industry, we're doing something called POSH, which is prevention of sexual harassment. Okay, so moving from being product-focused to customer-centric, that's how you're trying to invite that into all of our journeys and so on. The big realization again we came to is when we are talking so much about our customers and trying to do all of this to our customers and so on and so forth, what exactly are we doing to our employees? Piyush again puts that very nicely in context. You're probably best bank in the world for your customers, but are you really the best bank for your employees or not? And that's an extremely bold statement for global CEO to make in the sense that everybody talks about customers so much, but in this process we keep forgetting that the employees are the ones who are actually making the customer journeys better. So the mandate for us was start looking at your employee journeys even before you go in and talk about your customers, because if your employee experience is top-notch, they will automatically take care of your customers. And that was the offsite that we recently had, and we said there are 250 such employee journeys on which we can actually make this much, much better than where we stand today. Okay, so how does all this magic happen? Is a massive amount of data that we are able to generate and how to take it forward from there. I'll put that in context here. I have a chatbot, like any other bank. We also need to service our customers, right? The way to service your customer is, you pick up your phone, you call your customer service representative somewhere, and then say, hey, something is not working, and so on. And then the banks traditionally will have a big call center running behind the scenes. Some of the largest banks in the world, they have about 1,500 to 2,000 employees who are manning the desk. This is a call center who is receiving your call, put you on hold, and so on and so forth. Similarly, I also have a call center, and that is operating, by the way, by a robot. 96% of the traffic that I receive on DigiBank today is operated by a chatbot, okay? And human intervention is not required. Customer satisfaction, by the way, is at about a 4.5 vis-a-vis on a scale of 5. That means you can take that entire concept of having to service your customer through human beings and have your chatbot operate on top of it, and the amount of data it generates in return for me is the intelligence that I have to fuel it further. So that's how the equation flows. We do that for ATMs. Interesting concept about ATMs. If you have gone to an ATM recently and you ran out of cash, okay, and that's a most common phenomenon, and we've discovered that. It happens quite a lot. Either the denomination that you need is not coming out of that ATM, or you ran to the ATM just to find the ATM is out of cash or out of order, and so on and so forth. And Singapore economy, Hong Kong economy is heavily reliant on cash to a large extent. We've taken that, and we've received a number of awards that are on that as well. We have a machine learning algorithm that is running behind the scenes that can give me a projection of what the cash projection is going to look like for the next 10 days. It could be holidays coming up, it could be your paycheck day, it could be for whatever reason you want to withdraw cash. The precision right now stands at 98%. That means my ATMs never run out of cash. My customers will get the exact same denomination that they want, and obviously that will result in a lot of customer satisfaction and so on and so forth. What happens behind the scenes is we are able to analyze, including the demographic information. Every time you are able to transact somewhere and what your lifestyle is going to look like, based on that we are able to predict how much cash to replenish. The complexity is probably a little bit deeper for me to explain out here, but the complexity is ATMs don't replenish themselves. You need to dispatch a secure van that should go in there with an army of, let's say, 6 or 7 people. One person will open the ATM, the other person will stock the ATM, and so on and so forth. If 96% of the time my ATM is not running out of cash, that means I'm going to incur a lot of additional overhead as well, right? On that metric, we've reduced our cost of operation by 27%. That means I'm replenishing my ATMs lesser than most of the other times. So I'll leave you with that thought in terms of how complex it might look like. So that's our strengthening our people and culture bits of it, and this is where the rubber hits the road for us. The journey has been tremendous. We've been recognized by the world over that we are the best bank in the world and so on, but that journey has not been an easy journey in the sense that these are the 5 principles on which we started operating. Being customer obsessed, yes, of course, that's second nature for all of us. But more important is being data driven, right? No bank in the world is able to harness the data the way we are able to harness and figure out how these people are able to operate in their lives. Being agile to the core. 14,800 experiments is what we have run last year. Okay, I'll let you sort of figure out as to what's happening here. This is a bank which services your customers, holds money on behalf of all of my customers, which is running experiments. Okay, that's a scary bit, right? When you look at an organization, it's not a tech company. If the same was to be mentioned by, let's say, a Google or a Microsoft, you would look at it and say, yeah, that makes logical sense. But here's a company which is dealing with financial data, which can move markets. Every time we stand in a market and then make a press release, it will have an impact on the economy of the country. And this is an organization that is running experiments, and that too at a scale. 14,000 to 15,000 experiments that we've been able to run. The only reason why we are able to do that and still sustain our market position is because of our investments into technology and the kind of transformation journey that we have been able to take. Okay? 100 plus startups. We actually quite actively invest in startups. On an everyday basis, I meet at least 2 or 3 different startup vendors, assess them as to what their customer value proposition is and where the investment is. We make a decision whether to invest in it, or we sort of help an extended hand in helping them become better. We drive a lot of community events as well. Python conference, if any of you are technology event, the recent Python conference that happened was chaired by us. In fact, I was a keynote speaker for Python conference as well. There's thousands of experiments that we keep running. Is to figure out what the customer really wants for the future. Why this is important for us is on 2 levels. When we started on this journey about the agility and so on and so forth, the one and only one mandate that the board gave us is not a single person should be left behind. Okay, what does that mean? Here is a bank that has been operating for, let's say, 50 plus years and so on. Embracing modern technology is going to be very, very hard. The easiest path that most people will take is there is going to be a retrenchment, there's going to be a massive amount of layoff and so on and so forth. And then you start bringing in new set of people with new skill sets. The only mandate that the board gave us is not a single person should be left behind. So you'll become a 26,000 startup. That means the amount of investments that we start making in learning and development for our existing staff. This is not a brand new set of we go in and hire a bunch of people and bring them in, but rather train all of our existing people to start looking at the future. That's where the agility and being a learning organization comes in. The program that I run, and very recently I ran this program, the 11th edition of Hack to Hire. So you have your existing population which is getting trained on modern technology stack and so on. But at the same time, I have to bring in new set of talent as well. And that has to be done at scale. When I started here, my team size was about 100. Actually 75 to 80 people. And right now I'm supposed to exit the year with 1,800 people. Right now I'm sitting at about 1,600 developers, another 200 more to go. That means in a span of 1.5 to 2 years, the journey that we were in, I have to do a massive amount of hiring. And the only way to do is something called Hack to Hire. And the way this works, and we recently concluded the 11th edition of it, we launch an online test, and typically about 10 to 12,000 people tend to take the test. Okay? And then we invite them over after we prune the test. Literally, we book off the entire either Trident Hotel or ITC Sheraton or one of those big hotels. Bring those shortlisted set of people for 2 days. Give them a live challenge that we are actually working on. Okay? And over 24 to 48 hours, these people are hacking away. That means they are demonstrating their skills, they are demonstrating their coding, and being able to work with each other real time and so on and so forth over a course of 24 to 48 hours. What happens is actually a 2-way interaction. The traditional way of hiring is I'd go face off an interviewer. The interviewer asks me a bunch of questions for about an hour or so, and then is making judgment calls around whether I am a right fit or not. And we know that is definitely not the right way to hire technologists, at least from a mindset standpoint. So instead, we invented this program called Hack to Hire, where the participant is also able to assess us at the same time where we are assessing. Imagine us sitting at a table of, let's say, 8 different developers that you've never met in your life, and you're solving a challenge. That means there is time pressure for you to challenge, right? And you are demonstrating your skill because at the end of the day, you want to get hired. And there is tech mentors roaming around, and you're able to show off while also taking input as to what this organization is all about. So far, what we have done is, again, like I said, I was at about, let's say, 75, 80 people, or roughly about 100 people when I started this program. 11 editions later, I'm right now at 1,600 people. So, thank you. And that is not enough for us. Now we need to expand this horizon all the way across the world. So recently I launched this program called P-Shift. It's a paradigm shift, where we said, okay, you might not necessarily be interested in joining DBS, but you have brilliant ideas that you could bring to transform banking industry, right? So if you go online and let's say Google it and say P-Shift, the first thing that comes up is the paradigm shift program that we recently launched. This has attracted 1,200 submissions so far from locations like Estonia. Somebody was talking about Estonia. I was in Estonia recently. Amazing set of people out there. And we have submissions from Estonia, from Poland, from Israel, from everywhere around the world, about 1,200 odd submissions on how to improve banking for their particular segment. And majority of them are just interested in coming and joining DBS now. So we are actually going through that process. We obviously have the best workplace in the world. This is the office space. Okay, and this is live pictures, by the way. If you happen to visit DBS office, you will not feel that you are visiting a bank. Those are the live pictures of where we stand. That is DBS Singapore, Asia Hub, where I am located in Hyderabad, and so on and so forth. The thinking behind that is, when you are modernizing your technology and trying to do it for customer segments whose needs might be changing every day, your workplace also need to be vibrant enough so that they're able to bring in that kind of a thinking, as opposed to having a conventional workspace where you're sitting together and then developing code or producing code, versus the empathy also needs to come in. So that's the story that we have so far. Literally everybody in the world right now is talking about the transformation journey that a bank like ours is able to go in. I'd be happy to take any questions from here on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Srikanth. Any questions, please? Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Balarama Varanasi. I'm a globalization consultant for US Global Business Forum. I see that you have, say, 26,000 customers, right?
26,000 employees, yes.
Employees. How many customers?
Customer base globally, you mean, or?
Globally.
Globally, I think we are running at about 37, 38 million customers.
Okay. What would be like a tenfold increase in customer base? What would be the acquisition cost for that?
Oh, beautiful question. In fact, there is this concept of linearity versus exponentiality, right? So the linearity concept is quite simply, for you to double your revenues, you need to acquire additional set of customers and then start exponentiating from there on. Versus the exponential thinking, which is the thinking that we have, is I'm not going to run around and try to acquire new customers, but instead increase the lifetime value of each of my customers that are currently existing. That means if I embed myself into the journey of my existing customers itself, the lifetime value each customer brings is exponentially higher than the linearity of trying to acquire additional customers. The problem with the concept of acquiring new customers all along is that's the resort that you'll get into in terms of trying to give solutions and products that majority of the customer base actually doesn't need, right? And you end up servicing them. Thereby, you'll incur additional costs. So our concept is never about trying to acquire additional customers, but service our existing customer base so I can improve the lifetime value of a customer.
Hello,
This is the
I
last
have a
question, please. Last question.
I have a question.
So,
From a very closed technology regulated industry, you said that some of the APIs are opened up and you are the first to do like that. So my question is, like, what are those that you have made it very common, and still what are those that is regulated in terms of the APIs?
Okay. Again, if you're familiar with the banking industry terminology, there's something called CASA accounts. CASA accounts is your current account, savings account, and so on and so forth. This is the most protected data that no bank anywhere will be able to open. But then there is a parallel initiative that is currently coming up called Open Banking. HKMA, Singapore's MAS, and even India's RBI, that I work with on almost an everyday basis, now is investing in something called Open Banking. That means no bank is allowed to protect and create moats around it, and they should be opening it up anyway. This is now coming down as a policy from the governments, including RBI. RBI is now being very progressive in that area. Singapore's Monetary Authority of Singapore and HKMA has already done that. So we can literally open up everything.
Okay, thank you.
sure. One last question, and that's
Hi,
it.
Srikanth. That was a nice presentation. I have two questions for you. First one is, I'm from Bangalore. I've seen only one ATM in one of the malls in Bangalore. With this competition of banks going around the world, what is your plan to install more ATMs across the country or across the world? Second question is about, you talked about the POSH policy, prevention of sexual harassment. And you told that with the AI, you can predict whether the employee is going to make it or not. How is it possible?
Okay. I would love to sit down and explain how the POSH model works, but it will take me multiple sessions to do that. The parameters that I look at it is more about the at-risk employees, and then say what is the likelihood and propensity of somebody committing something of that nature, and then we sort of prevent it from that angle. From an expansion plan, DBS Bank recently received something called WOS, wholly owned subsidiary from Indian government. So that means we are now allowed to open up branches. Technically, we can go in and start expanding our physical presence around the country and so on and so forth. I've recently opened a branch in Hyderabad. It's located in Somajiguda. But the way we are approaching is we are not going and investing heavily into physical real estate, but rather we are partnering with somebody like a Cafe Coffee Day. That means you can literally walk into Cafe Coffee Day anywhere in the world and interact with DBS Bank. Okay, so you have a kiosk in the corner and so on and so forth while you're purchasing coffee. And the coffee is on us if you're interacting with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Srikanth. May I call upon Mr. Madhav Reddy, Director, PMIPCC Board, to felicitate Mr. Srikanth Mopidevi. And may I call upon Monica, too.
Thank you.
Announce a few things.